And now for more on this, Robert Sutter, the Professor of Practice of International Affairs at the Elliott School of George Washington University, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us on this broadcast, Professor. Now, what does this win by the DPP mean for the future of Taiwan?
I think it's an important benchmark in where we're going with Taiwan. I think Taiwan's future is good. I think there's been an awful lot of attention to the likelihood of Beijing using military force against Taiwan. I think that's remote in the near term. I think what we see is a situation where Beijing has constraints. Strong military action, which would lead to U.S. involvement, is something that's really seems to be out of the question at this point, because Beijing is preoccupied with a whole range of other issues. Their military doesn't look very strong these days. Lots of corruption reports and things of that nature. And the Xi Jinping, while a very strong leader, has assiduously avoided direct confrontation that would involve America. Very careful to avoid that. Recently, we have patrols with the Philippines, U.S. patrols with the Philippines in the disputed South China Sea. Beijing does not confront that. And I think that's emblematic of the prudence of Beijing. So I think, as the previous report indicated, we will see demonstrations of unhappiness from Beijing. But the danger of war, I think, is very low. It is low at this point. I just think it's for and the other reasons about this, of course, is the U.S. side. The U.S. is very strong in supporting Taiwan. We haven't had such a strong position of support for Taiwan since we broke relations with Taiwan a long time ago. It's quite striking, and this is something that Beijing would have to take into account. And one final point that I would mention, a couple of other points, but if I could just mention one at this point, is that Beijing faces a situation of deterrence. In the past, most forecasts were that if there was a conflict over Taiwan, the U.S. would be on one side, but alone. No one would be with the U.S. Today, that's very different. Today, Japan is much more strongly committed to this sort of position. Australia is much more committed. And then we have the situation where countries like South Korea and the Philippines are much more willing to help in this situation. Plus, we have all of the European powers, NATO and others, who are now focused on what this would mean for them. And they are prepared, and many of them are prepared to take economic sanctions actions against a Chinese attack against Taiwan. That's emblematic and similar to the approach they took to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And so Beijing faces strong deterrence, and as well as very serious and very significant internal difficulties that I think will limit the extent of their outburst or their unhappiness with this the outcome of this election.
Right, Professor, you did touch on a few of the points here. Can you also please reflect upon what the ruling party's victories implications for Washington and the implications for the Asia-Pacific region will be?
Well, I think we can expect continuity. This person was the vice president under the previous president. She had a very carefully constructed approach for dealing with Beijing and dealing with the United States and others as well. And so I think this now President-elect Lai is going to follow that. So this is very sober. This is another element dissuading Beijing from taking action now. That is, Taiwan is not going independent. That's over. That drive to do that is too dangerous. And the political consensus in Taiwan is we're not going to vote for a president that wants to do that. And so for Beijing's point of view, what does that mean? Well, it means the worst isn't going to happen in Taiwan. They're not going to go independent. And so they could wait. And rather than take a very dangerous attack of military confrontation with the United States. So on the U.S. side, I think this is a good thing. This keeps the situation under control. The Biden administration, I think, is carefully managing this issue, and I think it's doing a good job in the context of their One China policy, very strong in supporting Taiwan, but avoiding breaking the understandings with Beijing that would leave Beijing with no choice other than to attack Taiwan. And so they're very careful to avoid this conflict type of situation. And I think Mr. Lai will stay within that parameter. One point I would add is that the legislative yuan, the Congress of Taiwan, the vote there is that the ruling party is no longer the dominant party in the Congress, in the legislative yuan. And they have to therefore cooperate with the opposition to get legislation passed. And they could run across some difficulties in doing that. So it's not as easy for them to take any sort of action, even if they wanted to. That would be very disruptive of relations with Beijing.
Professor Robert Sutter, thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast and your valued insights.
Thank you.